Brahm is akhand, indivisible. It is adrishtya, beyond sight. It is achintya, beyond thought. It is nirvishesh chinmatram, it's undifferentiated consciousness. It's sarva pratyay darshanin, all-knowing, supremely intelligent, purna, complete in itself, amatra, limitless, and it is above all nirguna, without attributes. Any attempt to define it is to circumscribe it. And therefore the famous line, neti neti, not this, because if you say it is this, then it cannot be that, when it is all-encompassing. Now, it is the profundity of thought, because it is cosmic in scale. And this Brahm, which pervades everything, which is beyond any attributes, a part of it is in us, as the Atma. And therefore one of the great Mahavakyas of the Upanishads is, Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahm. I am Atma Brahm. Atma is the same as Brahm. In other words, each of us has within us that component of this all-pervasive cosmic consciousness within us, but it is overlaid by an ephemeral and transient world to which we are permanently distracted to.
Thank you very much. You did a great job introducing him. My job is nearly done. So I won't go over all his wonderful civil service, ambassadorial and political accolades, which are legion. But I will talk about him being an intelligent, learned, cultural, and extremely funny individual. And that fun part is so important in a person. In someone who has character and who has something to say, it's very, very important that they can say it with that sense of humor, which he does so well. But he treats serious subjects. Being Indian as one of his books, Becoming Indian as one of his books on Shaunaka, his book on Krishna and on Rama, and then on Shankaracharya that we're going to hear about today. These are serious reflections on serious subjects, and it takes a certain kind of a mind to do a bestseller in these kind of presentations. And they range from the political to the spiritual rather seamlessly, and that's why I call him an intellectual, a thought leader. And it's that kind of integration of writing that inspires me about him. He has told me, and I asked him if he could provide evidence of 2 books, Echoes of Eternity, A Journey Through Indian Thought from the Rig Veda to the Present. That's an awfully long time. And once you say the present, of course, the next day it's an old book. But this is just hot off the press, and also the great Hindu civilization, achievement, neglect, bias, and the way forward. So that's an inspiring title that I recommend for you. But what we're going to hear about today is one of his most successful books that has been translated into many different Indian languages, Adi Shankaracharya, Hinduism's Greatest Thinker. Now, when you're in Oxford and someone says Hinduism's greatest anything, immediately you're kind of going, oh dear. But it's Pavan Varma, so I think we have to start to take it seriously. So I'm very interested to see how he defends this thesis of Adi Shankaracharya, and I think you have a lot of evidence to give. Thank you, Pavan.
If you don't mind, I'll stand and speak.
Please, yeah.
Thank you very much, Shaunaka, for that very generous introduction. And let me say what a great pleasure it is to be speaking and Voices of Faith. I want to thank Wendy and Kamini and of course Sanjay Roy and the Teamwork team, all of you for being here. I think the thing before I start to speak about Adi Shankaracharya is to try to understand the whole approach of Hinduism, which is essentially not a search for divinity. It's a search for what could be the truth. And it begins possibly 7,000 years ago and defines Hinduism as a whole, in which Advaita, or one of the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy, was probably the most powerful and certainly the most influential in terms of molding the philosophical structure of Hinduism. And when I say that this search was one of interrogation, of questioning, of exploration, perhaps the best example I can give as a background before I come to Adi Shankaracharya, the time is too short really to be able to compress such a lecture in the scope of about 20-25 minutes, but I will make the attempt. I'm going to read a passage from the Rig Veda, the Nasidya Sukta, which is now dated to about 4000 BC or 3500 BC. And in this passage, which will give you an idea what the whole journey of the Hindu faith has been about. This passage says, and I quote, "There was then neither non-existence nor existence. Then there was neither the realm of space nor the sky which is beyond. What stirred? Where? In whose protection? Was there water bottomlessly deep? There was neither death nor immortality then. There was no distinguishing night or day. That one breathed windless by its own impulse. Other than that, there was nothing beyond. Who really knows? Who will here proclaim it? Whence was it produced? Whence is this creation? The gods came afterwards with the creation of this universe. Who then knows whence it has arisen? Whence this creation has arisen? Perhaps it formed itself, or perhaps it did not. The one who looks down on it in the highest heaven, only he knows, or perhaps he does not know. Now, this is one of the defining lines which begins the journey of Hinduism, where you will notice that there is no fiat, there is no diktat, there is no certitude. There is an invitation to question, an invitation to ideation, an invitation to explore within and without, an invitation to expand the horizons of your thinking without necessarily stating that this is the truth. And when the journey begins like this, the background is that there were the 4 Vedas, and I was speaking before an authority, the Rig Veda, the Yajur, the Sam, the Atharva Veda. And basically, together they constitute the Samhitas, the basic texts of Hinduism, not the foundational texts of Hinduism, the basic texts. And broadly, their content can be divided into 3 parts. One is the Brahmanas, which are really prescriptions for rituals that are to be followed by the Brahmins. But there is already in the very beginning another part of the Vedas, which are the Aranyakas, forest manuals, which are taking that step away from the practice of religion to the exploration of truth. That is why they are called forest manuals. And the third and the most profound aspect of the Vedas are the Upanishads. And because they come at the end of the Vedas, they are collectively called Vedanta or Advaita, because it is the Upanishads which lay the foundation of what constitutes Advaita. I want to say to you, as an illustration of the eclectic nature of Hinduism at the philosophical level, and throughout what I am going to say today distinguishes between the practice of religion and the pursuit of philosophy. The ritual of religion and the pursuit of the spiritual. And the two coexist and yet are different. And in some ways overlap, and yet the trajectories are different, and Hinduism has maintained that. So, in the Upanishads, and no one knows who their author is, no one knows how many Upanishads there are. There are recognized to be 12 major Upanishads, which come at the end of the Vedas. You will find the beginnings of the Advaita doctrine not put in any coherent order, but the thought. And you have to imagine in your mind that now some 5,000 years ago, there are sages in a hermitage in the forest who are writing these. For instance, I quote one paragraph from the Mundak Upanishad which says, above the senses is the mind. Above the mind is the intellect. Above that is the ego, and above the ego is the unmanifested cause. And beyond is Brahm, omnipresent, attributeless. Realizing Him, one is released from the cycle of birth and death. The Upanishads has many paragraphs referring to one pulsating cosmic consciousness, which is the search for truth. And indeed, all the six systems of Hindu philosophy can technically be called atheist. They don't talk about God. Their purposes, and the six systems, as you know, are the Nyaya, Vaisheshik, the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Purv Mimansh, the Uttar Mimansh. The Uttar Mimansh is Vedanta, Vedanta is Advaita. None of them talk of God except perhaps a little in the Yoga, Sankhya Yoga. They are trying to understand what could be the truth behind the bewildering plurality of the cosmos. And the answer has to be also cosmic in scale and universal in application. Not from the point of view of this microscopic dot called Earth, but from the point of view of this huge cosmic canvas, and they come up with the answer in the Advaita school that the real truth is Brahma, which they call Brahma, which is this pulsating, all-pervasive cosmic consciousness. And how do they define Brahma? Brahma is akhand, indivisible. It is adrishtya, beyond sight. It is achintya, beyond thought. It is nirvishesh chinmatram, it's undifferentiated consciousness. It's sarva pratyaya darshanin, all-knowing, supremely intelligent, purna, complete in itself, amatra, limitless, and it is above all nirguna, without attributes. Any attempt to define it is to circumscribe it. And therefore the famous line, neti neti, not this, because if you say it is this, then it cannot be that, when it is all-encompassing. Now, it is the profundity of thought, because it is cosmic in scale. And this Brahm, which pervades everything, which is beyond any attributes, a part of it is in us, as the Atma. And therefore one of the great Mahavakyas of the Upanishads is Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahm. I am Atma Brahm. Atma is the same as Brahm. In other words, each of us has within us that component of this all-pervasive cosmic consciousness within us, but it is overlaid by an ephemeral and transient world to which we are permanently distracted to. And the way that Advaita analyzes this is fairly scientific. It says the mind consists of three elements: buddhi, intelligence; ahankar, ego; and thirdly, the chitta. The intellect, as you know, the analogy is that it's like a monkey jumping from one branch to the other incessantly. It's never still. The mind is never still. Even when you are trying to sleep, it is always active, mostly in a sterile way, but overactive. And the ego is the ultimate delusion to which all of us are prey. Because we believe that that sense of I-ness is what dominates the fact and explanation of my existence. And lurking behind that is that chitta, that silent, unmoving, unchanging consciousness within you, which is an observer. Now, in the way we go about our lives, the mind dominates. Yoga is defined as chitta vritti nirodha, that you try and control your thoughts. If you quieten your mind and if you downplay your ego, you will automatically allow the chitta to become more important than the constant activity of the mind and the constant claims of the ego. And that chitta within you, when aroused, allows you the experiential experience of bliss and awareness. Satchidanand, Chit and Anand, awareness and bliss, which is the experiential inference of that Brahm as well, although it remains undefinable. So ultimately, we have it within us in this life to experience that bliss which we hope to get in paradise or later in another birth about which we have no empirical proof. But Advaita argues that it is at your doorstep today, provided you silence your mind by practice. You give your ego perspective by seeing your infinite irrelevance in the larger scheme of things. And you allow that inner observer within you to be able to enable you to experience that bliss and awareness which is the essential truth of your very being. So you will notice in this there is no God. There is a sense of bliss which is attainable to each of us in this lifetime. There is that sense of complete awareness, which is luminosity, compressed luminosity, to which you are heir, and that is your real self. But most of us think that we will get it later and never control our mind or control the ego. Now why, if this is the only reality which is Brahm, what is this world about? As Ghalib says, जब कि तुझ बिन नहीं कोई मौजूद तो ये हंगामा खुदाई क्या है? What is all this world about? This transient world that we live in. And according to Advaita, that which is transient, that which is unstable, that which is subject to change can never be the truth. But that which is eternal, that which is unchanging, only that can be the truth. And Brahm is eternal and unchanging. And if that is the case, how do we explain this world in which we live in? Shankaracharya says that why Brahm, which is pure bliss and awareness, which is the only reality of this cosmos, allows for the ephemeral and the transient to come into being is anirvachaniya, inexplicable. And he says this transient, ephemeral world exists and does not exist. It exists because it is. It does not because it is not real, eternal, and therefore not the ultimate. It is subject to decay, it is subject to passing away, it is transient, it is ephemeral. So it exists and it does not exist, and the most common analogy given in Advaita is that of the serpent and the rope. So long as you think that the rope is the serpent exists in your mind. The moment you realize the truth that the serpent is actually a rope, the serpent ceases to exist. And in a way, this is the analogy of our life. The moment we begin to understand that the transient is not your real self, but that the real self within you, which is overwhelmed by your distractions of the mind and the ego, is that which is unreal. Immediately that transformation between the serpent and the rope takes place. So, Shankaracharya, contrary to what people believe, did not say that the material world does not exist. All he argued for was that the value that you give to it as human beings for almost all your life is a fallacy. The Bhagavad Gita then teaches us how to live in this world and to yet be transcendent of it. But Advaita's theory is that this world is, but you give it much more importance than it deserves because you are seduced by the transient rather than being in the pursuit of the eternal and the real. And so part of the spiritual pursuit is to understand the difference between essentially the real and the unreal. And the moment you understand what is the real, you begin to experience, as I said, that bliss and awareness which is your essential nature. So, according to Advaita or Hindu philosophy, and I don't know from where it was derived, at least not in Advaita, there is no question of a rebirth. Because you were never born. You were never born because you have remained that cosmic consciousness which is itself beyond change. So Shankaracharya denies everything. He says, na me raga dvesha, na me moha lobha, mado neva, me neva, matsarya bhava, na dharmo, na chartho, na kamo, na moksha. All the four. There is no dharma, there is no arth, there is no kam, there is no moksha. No moksha also. All that you have is Chidananda Rupa, bliss and awareness. And then he commits what by many faiths would be the ultimate blasphemy. He says, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. And by that he is not necessarily becoming theistic. Shiva is supposed to be, in many ways, in Hindu philosophy, the embodiment of that chitta. And the ephemeral world is latent within him, called the Chitta Swarupani, which is what happens when Shiva and Parvati come together. Both are transcendent and yet they create the world, but that is partly straying into mythology. So he says, I am Shiva. He says, na punyam, na papam, na sokhyam, na dukkham. There is no punya, there is no sin, there is no dukkha, there is no sukha. Na mantro, na tirtho, na vedo, na yagna. There is no mantra, there is no tirth, there is no ved, there is no yagna. Aham bhojyanam neva bhojyam na bhokta. I am the experiencer, but I am neither the experienced nor the experienced. I am none of this. All I am is Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham Shivoham. I am bliss and awareness. I am bliss and awareness. And that is what my realization must be. So, in that sense, if you look at this theory of Advaita, it is actually cosmic in scale. And what is really interesting is, somebody shown me the 10 minutes? No, not yet. No, we have time. So, what is really interesting is that this doctrine of Advaita is, because it is not related to one divinity and one set of diktats, that this alone is what is right or wrong. This you must follow. It has an ethical framework, because when you are in bliss, it's very difficult to do wrong, which agitates your mind. But it transcends all of this and is truly cosmic in scale. And what is interesting today is that I have a chapter in my book called The Remarkable Validation of Science. Now, this is not the Dinanath Batra school, which said that in the past there was television and there were cars and aeroplanes and so on and so forth. This is the validation of Nobel laureates of science, cosmology, and quantum physics today. Because what are the elements of this doctrine? If it says that Brahm is infinite, today cosmology is showing us that the universe is infinite. I mean, light travels at the speed of 300,000 kilometers a second. The Earth, which is a dot in the Milky Way, is one galaxy which is 150,000 light years across. But there are at least today, science tells us, cosmology tells us, 150 billion more galaxies, each with at least 200 billion stars, millions of times larger than the size of the sun. And cosmology further tells us this is the already mind-boggling size of the universe. And some recent scientists discovered a new galaxy called Saraswati, which they named Saraswati, which is 4 million light years away. Just calculate in your head. When I told you the speed of light, 4 million light years away and 600 million light years across. And cosmology tells us that this already mind-bogglingly large universe continues to expand every second at the speed of light. Expanding into what? So the theory of Advaita is not restricted to the last 5,000 years or to the finite scale of a minor planet in a minor galaxy. It is cosmic when it says this Brahm or consciousness is amatra, infinite. Cosmology is proving it. When he says that it is indivisible, it is supremely intelligent. I mean, we know that in spite of this size, there is an inner intelligence that informs the cosmos. The turning of spring to summer, when the sun rises, when the sun sets, there is some supreme intelligence guiding the working of this vast canvas of cosmos. Similarly, when he says that what you see is not really what it is. In other words, it is and it is not. Today, quantum physics has completely changed our notion of reality. There were certitudes in science when Galileo came up with the fact that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Then you had Newton with his gravitational theory, which seemed to be the end of everything. And then came a patent, an officer working in a Swiss patent office called Einstein, who completely upended science by the theory of relativity. Matter and energy are interchangeable. Nothing is absolute. And then you came with Nietzsche saying in the 19th century, God is dead. And in our time, Stephen Hawking saying philosophy is dead, because science has overtaken our whole notion of what reality is. A particle is a wave is a particle. 96% of the universe is dark matter about which we know nothing. When you see the sun rise in the morning, it's not the sun as it is because it is the sun as it was 8 minutes ago, because that is the time light takes to travel to Earth. So what you see is not what exists. And at the end of all of this, two scientists in particular, Max Planck and Edwin Schrödinger, both I think won the Nobel Prize for Physics, came up with what seemed to be a revolutionary idea, where they said that consciousness is primary and matter is derivative. The same theory that Advaita 5,000 years ago, without any knowledge of the ways that science functions today, could conceptualize in moments of deep insight, intuition, and meditation. So, when, for instance, Advaita says that the world is, this Brahma is indivisible. Now, there are so many experiments which are carried out, but one which I find most dramatic is the EPR experiment in 1935. You take two electrons, Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen experiment, and both the electrons will spin at the same speed, but when separated and if they are put in the same axis, instantaneously their revolution will change. One will go clockwise and the other anti-clockwise. So if you have one electron here in this maze called the Barbican Center, and you have another in Seattle, and put them in the same axis, and instantaneously the counterclockwise and clockwise happens. This is faster than the speed of light. How does it happen? And there are so many more examples. The lecture time doesn't permit it. But interestingly, neurology is today showing in its latest experiments what happens to you when for a moment you subdue the constantly volatile activity of the mind and negate the ego and allow the chit to become the dominant factor in your life, that inner, silent observer, unchanging within you, also called the Atman. And experiments have been carried out in the most advanced laboratories, especially by Dr. Andrew Newberg and others, where they take a practiced meditationer, put him in a room, and they have injected a radioactive dye, and just as he is about to go into his deepest moments of meditation, he gives a tug on a thread tied to his finger, and the scientists then do a spect of his brain. And they see all the colors are changing to lighter shades of green and blue. The agitations of the mind have gone, and the sense of complete awareness, of total bliss, of total oneness is so overwhelming. In fact, near-death experiences of those who have recorded it with some authenticity speak of the same sense of feeling, that the moment you realize, either as a near-death experience or in your own lifetime as a conscious choice of what is your real self, the entire structure of your mind changes. And the mind's neuroplasticity is almost infinite. It can change. So, the short point I'm making is that many aspects of what modern science is saying today is an endorsement of the basic concept of Advaita. Andrew Newberg calls it a state of absolute unitary being in that moment of deep meditation, when the mind is silenced and the ego is negated. So, you will then ask me, finally, if that is the case, what are all the gods and goddesses in Hinduism about? Well, I started by saying that there are two aspects to faith. One is philosophy, one is practiced religion. And one of the things our great philosophers realized, starting from Ramanujacharya, who came after Shankaracharya, was that this whole notion of a nirgun, attributeless cosmic consciousness was not good enough for human beings who wanted a personal deity. When you want a job, when you are ill, when you want something good to happen to you, in India usually it's a straight bargain with God. You put something in the hundi, make a little prayer and go away without seeing anything around you. But essentially you need a personal deity. And therefore Ramanujacharya, without denying the primacy of Brahm, came with a qualification to it which is called Vishishta Advaita. And after that the bhakti saints like Nimbakacharya, like Vallabhacharya, they came out with further derogations from it. Vishishta Advaita, Shuddha Advaita, Advaita Advaita, so on and so forth, which allowed for the primacy of Brahm, because that no school of Hindu philosophy reverses, but allowing for theism. allowing for this infinity of gods which foreigners can't understand. What they don't understand is that if the essential subconscious belief within your mind is that the absolute is Nirankar, Omkar, Mulyam, Turiyam, as in Sikhism they say, Ik Noor se sab jag upja. That one Noor is the ultimate reality. Then you can allow the human imagination to play with the gods and goddesses in whatever way you like. Create Vishnu in whatever form, 4 arms, 6 arms, create the goddesses, create Kali. All of them are a result of the infinite canvas of the divine. Mired, anchored, rooted essentially in that faith that ultimately the absolute is both attributeless, nirgun, all-pervasive in you and me, which is why we can make a rock into a god, or a tree a god, or the river a god, or the skies a god or a goddess. So it allows the human imagination to play around, and so we have infinite numbers of gods and goddesses, but ultimately they all telescope into that one reality, which is Brahm. And that is the basis of this very powerful school of Hindu philosophy, where there is no aspect of Hindu spiritual pursuit which it has not touched and influenced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pavan. If you could join me here. A wonderful journey and a wonderful interpretation. And I think that's what one of the great things about Voices of Faith, to get different people from different perspectives talking about their individual perspective on a different perspective. That's exciting.
Individual perspective on a perspective of the perspective.
Even that. And he'll say it's all one. So we'll go with that. But thank you very much. That was wonderful. We have some time. Oh, we don't have time.
We have no time.
Oh,
You'll have to speak to him
the boss.
outside.
Yeah, you'll speak outside. The boss says no time. That means the answers, the questions, it's all one.
Why this particular?
No, let Pavan speak.
I was just
He's
saying
saying why the discrimination is
against me.
Because we
It's-
Did I speak too long?
It's
Mr. Chairman, you should have stopped me.
it's Irish people. We're like that. For Irish people, like Indian people, time is eternal.
By the way, that too. One of the things Advaita says is that time has no boundaries, and that is why the cyclical nature of the universe. You know,
And it's only the Irish and the Indians get that.
time is infinite.
So there's nothing so important that can't happen until tomorrow. Thank you very much. I think a round of applause
Yes.
for Pavan's wonderful work. Thank you very much.